Hey guys, this is What If Deku Was a Descendant of Sparta, Part 1. Let's dive right into this fanfiction. Start our story off with, well, how Izuku would come to be a descendant of Sparta. And like I went on my poll, and I asked you guys specifically, how should he be related to Sparta? And you guys decided on a pretty wholesome one. Deku being one of the children of, well, Lady and Dante. Now, I'm not going to get too much into Lady and Dante, but I am going to state their jobs and the role they play. The DMC universe being pretty much merged with the My Hero universe, it will be some plot points that I will introduce later in the storyline, but I'm not going to get too deep into because I've basically recorded this video like 5 times, and all the times I spent way too much time just narrating and pretty much keeping a good understanding of what the hell is going on, like how's the DMC universe taking place in the My Hero world, and how pretty much the demons exist and all other stuff. That will all be answered in time, with each part focusing on those different aspects. For right now, we're focusing more on Izuku and how his childhood will be changed a lot, and also the childhood of someone else as well in the My Hero world, with Izuku being born by these two legends. Now, Lady and Dante would have had their own little life. Dante would have already had an established relationship with his brother now, him knowing his brother was alive. Would have an established relationship with his, nephew, and his nephew would also have a pretty solid relationship with Izuku, being there and babysitting him time to time. Now, during this time, we will see that, well, Dante would have eventually settled down, getting married to Lady, and Lady falling in love with Dante, and Dante falling in love with Lady. They would have had 2 children, actually, an older son being Izuku Midoriya, and a younger daughter being Zuki Midoriya. Be real here, bro. Knowing Dante and Lady, they ain't gonna stop at one kid. They ain't gonna stop at one kid. Let's be real here. Let's keep it a bug 50. Let's keep it a beam. We know how both of them is, bro. Let's keep it a beam. So yeah, so pretty much Dante and Lady would have had 2 children, a younger daughter and an older son. Now, Izuku being around 10 years old, or not 10 years old, but around 5 years old, being told that he was quirkless. During this time, he wouldn't have been told just yet about his family, about where his father is really from, about how his grandfather is something not human, something different, something more powerful, something a lot more demonic in nature. Now, with this being said, Izuku go his whole life thinking he's going to be powerless, considering that his mother is a pro hero in this continuity. Lady is a pro hero and also works for the government, and her pro hero name is, well, One Shooter, or I guess One Shot. Her pro hero name is One Shot because she has a quirk, actually. Her quirk is small scale telekinesis. It allows her to control the trajectory and speed and velocity of an object that's being thrown or shot. So she can literally copy the same power moves that, Diego or Don. I think his name was Diego from Umbrella Academy. He can basically control the trajectory and pretty much make knives literally curve and pretty much do all a bunch of other stuff. So anything thrown or shot out of her hands, like a gun or a knife, she can control the trajectory and speed. So she can literally boost up the speed of a bullet or a knife, depending more precisely, because they don't want the bullet to explode. But she can make the knife travel as fast as a bullet. So yeah, she's pretty strong with her quirk, especially since she's a top marksman. So she's on the top 20 roster of pro heroes. So she's pretty, pretty handy dandy. She's pretty accomplished on top of working with the government, or worked with the government. So yeah, I'm not gonna get into too deep of the whole government situation, but for now, we also know Dante is an actual vigilante, actually, and still has his business, Devil May Cry up, basically being a bounty hunter for rogue demons and other things such as shady gigs in and there, but nothing like super illegal, like murdering people or assassinations, but pretty much bounty hunting, tracking down people that don't want to be found and other things such as that. So Dante still has his little business, and he works it alongside Nero, actually, as Nero is one of his accomplished, or one of his, I guess you could say, pupils or whatever. So yeah, so we see that Nero has a really good relationship with his little cousin, and his little cousins, his little baby cousin, Izu or Zuzu or Jesus, what is her name? Azui. Fuck. What? I don't know what I said earlier in the video, but her name is Izu. Yeah, Izu is Izuku's younger sister's name. Now, she ain't gonna be a big part. She gonna be more or less, it's just his younger sibling because she's around 10 years old by the time Izuku is 15. So she's like 10, Izuku's around 15 years old. So yeah, she was like born a few months after Izuku was 5 years old. Now, pretty much simple, Izuku would love his little sister. Same thing with their family loving each other equally. Like it ain't no favoritism here. But Zooey would have actually shown a lot of potential, considering that, well, she had a quirk. She was born with a quirk. Her quirk being telekinesis. She had full on telekinesis. Like, she can literally move mountains. She had the potential to become someone like Jean Grey. So she had a lot of potential, and her power was untapped. So she had a lot of potential to become a really good pro hero one day. Now, we would see that, well, she would get trained by her mother, but before she was born, we would see that, well, she would have also trained Izuku when he was a child at the same time, teaching him how to protect himself because he didn't have a quirk. He didn't have a quirk, but he had something different. Izuku's blood was different. He was a amalgamation, a product of Sparda's DNA, Sparda's blood, and the blood of a quirk. He is the first human alongside his alongside his, I guess, his sister at least, to have demon blood and a quirk as well. One of the first. So his blood was very unpredictable. It was sporadic. It was different. Probably wondering, what do you mean he's quirkless? He just wouldn't be a normal person. No, because I would say quirk blood is a lot different from normal human blood because it's evolved blood. It's evolved human DNA. So, pretty simple, Izuku's body, low-key, the demon cell, or I guess his demon gene, would have been dormant because of this different level of sporadic behavior and his wild card like DNA. So the simple Bakugo would have still bullied Izuku. Izuku would have gone his whole life being bullied and being kind of, looked at as lesser than by Bakugo, one of his closest friends when he was growing up. Now, point blank, Dante would have told him, don't let that shit happen. Fight back. Even if you get beaten up, keep on fighting back. Eventually, it'll stop. So, well, that's what Deku did. Because Deku would have a firecracker type personality, considering that his father is literally Dante and his mother is Lady. So, Izuku would have more of a firecracker personality, similar to kind of, I guess you could say, similar to Nero's personality near the later games of Devil May Cry, but more of a chilled back kind of Spider-Man personality, being kind of quirky and throwing sparky remarks and pretty much joking then and there. So we would still have like an amalgamation of Lady's personality and Dante's personality. Now, with that being said, Izuku would fight back with Bakugo multiple times every time Bakugo tried to bully him, as it would always end with Deku getting beaten up, bruised up, or beaten up even more than he normally gets beaten up for. So yeah, but Bakugo would have, found, he would have respected Izuku's passion, his burning rage. Bakugo wasn't gonna, stop so easily, but more or less he did kind of respect Izuku for fighting back. But he still, looked down on Deku because he was quirkless. He was scum underneath his butte. So yeah, he just looked at him like he was trash. Doing this, we would see that Izuku more or less would pretty much hate Bakugo. But between their childhood drama and their beef, something different would have happened. Something life-changing. Izuku would have met a girl. And not the girls we know from Class 1A. It would have been, well, Himiko Toga. Himiko Toga would be Izuku's childhood friend. And this day, Izuku would have actually interfered. He would have caused a butterfly effect because he would have been living in a different part of the city. He would have been living a different type of life. He would have had a different type of day that day. And he would come across, well, Toga. As he would change Toga's life for the better, or maybe for the worse. as he would have guided her on a better path, being her friend and accepting her for who she is. At this point, Izuku was about 6 or 7, as he was already told about his whole family lineage and about how his father is, how strong he is, and who his grandfather is, and also about his uncle and him being told about his, cousin and how strong he is. Because he hasn't met his, uncle yet. He hasn't met Virgil at all his whole life. But Virgil does know he exists, and we will be introduced to Virgil later in the story. But for now, Izuku has been told about the whole family of his, lineage, him being a descendant of Sparta and all this other mumbo jumbo. Not being told the true nitty gritty because he's still a kid, but being told he wasn't all human, as he was a kid. He was a kid. He was a nice comic book nerd. He loved that science fiction stuff, and he was kind of excited to maybe have a quirk even if he was told that he was quirkless. So he would still hold on to that idea, that dream of becoming a pro hero. So he would be very, I guess you could say, kind. He wouldn't let people push him over, but he would still have that kind-hearted nature Izuku Midoriya has. Getting that from, well, Dante, because Dante is kind-hearted in the general sense that he won't let anything really bad happen to people. And same thing with Lady. Lady's a lot more cool and composed, but more or less, she does care about people. Kind of a bubbly personality, similar to the personality she had in Devil May Cry 6 or 5. So, yeah. So we see that, well, Deku would have been there for, Toga. Would have accepted her and would have not judged her off of her quirk. He would only judge people off the content of their character, not because they had a villain's quirk or they didn't have a quirk, but they looked a certain way. He would be way more open-minded and wouldn't be a big error, wouldn't be a pretty much a jerk. For example, like other characters in My Hero. So he would accept Toga. He would be friends with her, and they would literally become childhood friends, spending days with each other, going to the playground with each other, and pretty much having, a pretty solid relationship with each other. And her friendship with Izuku changing her outlook on people, and eventually having her go on to think about becoming a pro hero after Izuku would have told her that he wanted to become a pro hero when he got older. So that's what she would actually strive to be. She wanted to be a pro hero to get close to Izuku, but also to prove people wrong that she could become something great. She could become something amazing. To prove her parents wrong and say and do everything they said that she couldn't do. So, Toga set her mind on becoming a pro hero alongside Izuku. Now, she wouldn't print on Izuku, she showed up was crazy about this man, but we'll get more into that later on. We'll get a little to that later. But you see Izuku, more or less, we get a time gap a few years later. Izuku's a teenager now, around 15 years old, as he's being bullied by Baku yet again. Right after the classroom is told about how, you guys want to be pro heroes, and all this other stuff, and yada yada yada. But we see that Izuku does still enroll into UA, as Bakugo pretty much jumps on Izuku and tells him yada yada yada. You aren't supposed to do this. You're quirkless, nobody nerd quirk. Like you have nobody. Blah blah blah. He just starts to say random stuff, trying to get under Izuku's skin. But he does push a button as he talks about his mom, about how Izuku's mom is hot as hell. Oh, she bad. She must be very, very disappointed that you have no quirk and you're literally a scum on the family name. And all the other stuff. As Izuku gets pissed off and chucks his backpack straight in Bakugo's face, as Bakugo draws blood on his lip as a part of his keychain on Izuku's backpack pretty much nicked Bakugo's lip. Bakugo gets pissed off and throws the explosion at Izuku, blowing his desk up and pushing him out of his chair. Izuku gets back up, putting in a fighting stance, and actually he knows how to fight because he was trained by his mother to, protect himself. So Izuku knows how to fight and knows hand-to-hand combat and some boxing moves. So they start to fight a little bit as Izuku actually is holding his own, but still he has no quirk and he has no power yet. So Izuku gets absolutely body slammed, but Izuku not letting up and trying to fight back against Bakugo again and again and again. Bakugo throwing more explosions towards him and getting more pissed off, as eventually he goes for another explosion as he's about to just Swiss cheese Izuku. Izuku dodges, but before he notices it, Izuku's halfway through the window of the building. He's falling backwards as Bakugo sees this and doesn't want Izuku to die. He just wants to bully him, or he He doesn't hate Izuku, he doesn't want him to die, so he rushes towards him to try to grab him, but he slips on Izuku's backpack and accidentally falls into him, pushing him off the ledge. Izuku falling from the window and cracking his neck and his body splattering against the pavement. Everybody's confused, shocked, and everybody looks up, but they don't see Bakugo, they see the two lackeys. They run off and Bakugo runs off as well. Everybody's shocked by this and is confused on what the hell's happening, as pretty much, well, the school sees this. They saw Izuku fall down and crack on the floor. But seconds later, everybody's shocked to see Izuku's body start to move. His body starts to change and morph as green energy starts to envelop his wounds as Izuku's energy starts to fade away. Them being confused as his body starts to amalgamate itself together and heal and regenerate. Now, for full disclosure, Izuku's regeneration would be the strongest of all of his family. So yeah, Izuku would have like Deadpool levels of regeneration, being able to come back from decapitation, head getting blown off, almost getting, charred to asunder, his brain getting, exploded. Everything along those lines. Izuku isn't limited to like headshots or decapitation. No. He literally can nearly come back from anything. I mean, literally anything. Izuku is a hard bastard to kill. Like, he's hard to kill, bro. So Izuku would have a pretty buffed out version of his increased demonistic, or I guess demonic healing. So he would have incredible amounts of healing factor, speed, and strength. So he would be able to heal so fast that his body would heal so fast and so, like, I guess aggressively, that if it was a blade stuck in his body and it wasn't going to be pulled out, it legit would just shoot out of his body, or either crack if, it was being pretty much squeezed by his skin. So pretty simple. Actually, no, that's stupid, bro. I'm gonna say Izuku would just have a very OP version of his healing factor, not having like a super fast healing factor, not faster than Dante, having the same amount of speed as Dante's healing factor, but he would have a very more powerful one. Him healing, crazy. I mean, healing from some crazy stuff. Well, I'm gonna pin him through some crazy stuff. Izuku would heal from some crazy stuff. So just stay in tune for that. But we see that Izuku more or less gets up, and everybody's shocked by this. People saying, "We all thought he was quirkless. What's going on?" As everybody's confused, as pretty much we see that Toga witnesses this, and Izuku is shocked and is on adrenaline right now as he runs off. As Toga runs after him, trying to figure out what's happening. She tries to go after him, but she loses him as Izuku actually hides in a nearby trash can, not trying to get fined by Toga. Toga runs off and is trying to call his number, but she can't get a reception, can't get a call, because Izuku's phone was completely cracked when he fell. Now, Izuku is walking back home as he's confused on what's happening to him. His body feels different. It feels better. He walks by a mirror, seeing his clothes are all ripped up, his school uniform, but he also sees behind his school uniform, his body's better somehow. He's been trained with his mother since he was a kid, so he already had a pretty good physique off rip. He had a pretty defined body, more like a fighter physique, but now he had a more similar physique to Dante's level. He was more chiseled and more defined, and he even had a little bit more muscle mass. Izuku would walk off, as you see that Izuku's, appearance would be different. Now, I think I said this earlier, or maybe I didn't. Izuku would have white hair, like everybody else in the Sparda bloodline, but he also would have the eyes of his mother, having, the two different, pretty much, mutations in his eyes. Same thing with his sister. Now, his sister doesn't have it. She has blue eyes and white hair, like Dante. And Izuku has white hair like Dante, or his father, but has the green and red eyes like his mother. So, pretty much simple, Izuku's walking back home, opens the door, and he sees his mother pretty much doing some, businesses. She's talking to someone on the phone. As she hangs up and looks at Izuku saying, "Are you okay? Baby, are you alright?" And she looks at him and sees that he's all bloody and bruised up, but there's no marks. His clothes are just ripped up and drenched in blood. She says that the school called her last night, or not called her last night, but called her a few minutes ago, saying that he fell off the building and just got back up. They'll talk a little bit. Izuku was told that his power probably got activated. And she also asked him, "How did you fall off the building?" She gets very serious. Izuku saying that he just fell, but her saying that the window was cracked open and you fell out of a broken window. And they saw two kids at the window when you fell down. You might not be dead, but those kids didn't know you had power. They could have killed you, Baku. They could have killed you, Izuku. As Izuku goes on and says, Mom, it's not that big of a deal. Without them, I probably would have never activated my powers. Her saying doesn't matter if they helped or not. He could have killed you. She gets pissed off and about to call the school and deal this with herself, but he begs her not to do anything, as he wants to start training. He wants to get a hold of his new power, and he wants to become stronger. He doesn't want to be bullied or looked at as a failure anymore. Her saying, baby, you're not a failure. You're my son. And they does talk a little bit, but she agrees to bump up his training and to teach him about marksmanship and also combat training. And also, well, calls up his father as Dante is actually out of, country working with Devil May Cry. Going after some sort of demon that's doing some, let's just say trafficking. So yeah, we see that pretty much, well, Dante eventually comes back home after about, let's say, 2 or 3 days, as we see that he comes home and starts training with, well, Izuku. Izuku starts training and changes in between training with his father, Lady, and Nero. And through that, he also trains with Himiko or Toga as well. As they bond over the 10-month arc training, as Izuku is kind of oblivious, but we see that Toga shows more and more interest and more or less has a very undertone relationship, or like she low-key is obsessed with Izuku. Like she has a huge crush on him. She has a huge crush on this nigga, but she loves him. But Izuku's a little bit of a dummy, so he doesn't know yet. But you see Izuku and Toga grow closer over the 10-month arc training, and also Izuku becoming stronger and faster. Izuku right now, for his strength and speed stats, he's around the same strength and speed as Dante, so this will give him a big ledge because Dante's freaking strong, bro. He's up there. So yeah, Izuku would have around the same strength, around 50 to 60% strength that Dante's full strength is. So Izuku will be pretty strong. Now, I'm not gonna give him his double trigger just yet, but let's just say his double trigger gonna be crazy. His power is going to be insane because low key, he already has a superior healing factor than everybody else in his family, including Sparda. So like low key, Izuku got some potential off rip, and that's just the beginning. So yeah, we see that Izuku more or less is training, as eventually one day he's training with Toga. They're going back and forth and pretty much just throwing some, jabs in there, and they're fighting back to back. As Toga basically, fights with him and trains her body, trains her skill to try to figure out how to, protect herself even if she doesn't have access to blood. So she learns more and more about her quirk and tries to learn more and more about how she can, pretty much use it in better and more specific ways besides just infiltration. So they're sparring right now, and Toga is sparring with Izuku, as eventually Izuku is getting overwhelmed. Toga telling him that she's not gonna hold back, and neither should he. They get into a fighting stance, as we see that Nero is actually there escorting it, and basically tells them to go, counting down to 1, 2, 3. They lunge towards each other, and Izuku starts to go jabs, punches, and weaves and dodges. Izuku's dodging and weaving and moving and dodging as he takes out his BB gun, as he's been trained with BB guns to pretty much get a good grip. And these BB guns are specifically modified to feel like actual guns, but just shooting out very painful bullets that won't kill you, but they will leave a nasty mark. So Izuku's using this, and it's basically just trying to get a good grip on marksmanship, on top of him already learning about swordsmanship from, his father, as he doesn't know too much about the more cut, better, and precise swordsmanship that Virgil knows. But he knows more of the more monstrous, swinging his sword in ridiculous speeds, like how Dante shows swordsmanship. So Izuku's more of a better gunman and more of a marksman than a swordsman. But he will learn more about swordsmanship and be kind of a master of swords, guns, and pretty much all weapons, but simple. But yeah, we see that Izuku starts to fight more and more as he starts to dodge and weave, and more or less he's getting a pretty good distance, but he runs out of bullets and says mess it or forget it, as he just goes in with it and starts to fight more and more. Toga throws a bunch of moves at him and kind of tries to disorient him, putting him in a headlock, try to pedal him, and more or less overwhelming him with more fury of attacks, barrages, and punches, and weaves and dodges. Izuku getting kind of pissed off as eventually he gets into a headlock and is overwhelmed by the amount of sheer stabbing and just straight up craziness that Toga is doing to him. Considering that Toga is told that Izuku can heal from pretty much a lot, she doesn't hold back. She legit is like throwing some moves that would kill a normal person. But she has full faith in Izuku's healing factor, considering that she saw him literally fall off a building and get back up after seeing his body splat like a pancake. So she starts to fight back, as eventually Izuku's eyes start to flicker. His hair starts to change color as streaks of green hair come out of his white hair. Izuku's eyes glow green as his eyes start to envelop some sort of green veins around his orifices. Izuku's body starts to change and shift as Nero witnesses this and sees that a double trigger is coming amongst, or something bad's happening, as he rushes in and stops the fight immediately, pushing Toga clean off of Izuku. Izuku stopped midway as he says, "What was that? I think, did I black out?" As he says no, but she almost activated cure. As he looks at Toga and tells her that Izuku gotta go home as we have some dinner with the family. She says, "Oh, can I go?" As Izuku says, "Well, Nero cuts him off, saying no. We gotta go home now." As they run off, and before they happen, they do drop off. Toga. They aren't jerks, so they do drop her off. As Izuku is told more about double triggers, about they're activated through adrenaline and a bunch of other stuff. As more or less, Izuku is kind of confused, but more or less kind of interested in this. But we get a time gap a few months later, as eventually the entry exams come along. But with that being said, we get switched to Izuku. Now, Izuku pretty much is dropped off by Lady or Mary, his mom, as his mom tells him to be safe and also to do your best. Not to let them kids overpower you and to show what you have. But not to do too much, okay? As she tells him to do okay, as Dante is also there as well, as they're about to go on a little bit of a mission in Europe, actually. Something about a werewolf or something, or some sort of monster causing mayhem, but more or less, they tell him to pretty much, keep calm and not to do anything crazy, okay? And Dante telling him not to do anything he won't or wouldn't do. You know what I'm saying? As he chuckles, as Lady slaps him, saying, "Man, what are you doing?" They have a little, banter, but they drive off. Izuku basically chuckling as Toga says, "Your parents are cute." As they walk off, and, well, the entry exams begin. They go their separate ways as pretty much Toga smiles a little bit after Izuku tells her to do okay and I believe in you. As she kind of becomes a little red and she walks off. We see that Izuku starts to, get ready as he tries to hype himself up. The running exam, he gets a really good scoring because Deku wasn't dumb. He still got that same smarts that Ken Deku had. So he gets a pretty good score, kind of a little bit above average for the reading exam. Now for the physical exam, let's just say it gets a little juicy, gets a little saucy. So Deku gets ready as he sees pretty much nobody he recognizes. Not even Ida. He doesn't bump into Ida. He doesn't mumble to himself. So the whole conversation between Ida and him trying to walk over to pretty much Chaku, that doesn't happen. We see that Izuku's, pretty much looking at his phone, turns it off and gets ready to, go crazy as he has a black version of his green jumpsuit on with his red shoes. Izuku having his wrist and pretty much his arms rolled up or his sleeves rolled up. Izuku gets into a defiant stance and gets ready to show his true strength. As you see that, well, more or less, Ida does tell him to calm down and get off your phone immediately. Izuku says, "Are you freaking for real, dude?" As he starts to go off on Ida, but before they can pretty much get into any more beef, we see that they get stopped immediately after the pro hero, President Mike, tells them there are no real counters in the fight. Go, go, go! As Izuku lunges up as hard as he can, jumping as hard as he can, basically one-shotting the big fence and jumping over it with minimal to no effort. Izuku starts to sprint and weave amongst the fake city and starts to literally just rip apart these robots using chunks of metal on the ground and using a part of the, one pointer's arm as kind of a shield / sword to cut through these robots like they're nothing. him showing off his demonic strength and speed, fighting kind of like his father, but with the swiftness and kind of finesse of his mother. So more or less, he's more of a defined version of Dante's fighting style. He starts to dodge and weave, pretty much mowing through these robots like it's nothing, gain up a lot of points in a pretty short amount of time. Most of the spectators being kind of impressed by his strength and speed. Nothing flashy with his quirk, but he is very proficient. Izuku is running off after seeing the zero pointer and is about to walk off, seeing that there's no real point in taking it on, but he hears a girl screaming. He looks back and sees a brown-haired girl under some rubble about to get smushed. Izuku, seeing this, not wanting this girl to die, he chucks the piece of metal in his arm he's been using as a sword/shield for the last couple minutes, and chucks it as hard as he can, and basically makes a wind barrier, breaks kind of a wind, like it's some sort of something happens, a shockwave happens as he chucks it as hard as he can, as it literally stabs into the zero pointer's foot, causing a little bit of shockwave for it to stop for just a split second, enough for Izuku to lunge over towards Ochaku and rip her out of the rubble, kicking the rubble off of her with his strength and jumping to another side of the building, halfway through the building, using his fingers to pretty much claw his way into the concrete with his raw strength. Izuku holds her, telling her, "Are you okay? Are you good? Are you hurt?" As her saying, "Maybe I think I ankle sprained." As he looks up and sees a zero pointer about to smack him off the side of the building, Izuku lets go, clutching Ochaku and taking the full damage of the fall into some rubble. Ochaku's okay, but she sees Izuku's body on the ground, covered in blood. She starts to scream, saying, "Are you okay?" And Izuku chuckles and says, "Yeah, I'm okay." She starts to see Izuku's wounds close up and heal, as Izuku tells her that he's okay, he has a regeneration quirk. She says that's freaky, but cool. As they do make their way to the Recovery Girl after sneaking past the zero pointer, as Izuku tells her, that was pretty close. But before they can actually, celebrate, the zero pointer finds them over the other side of the building and goes straight for Izuku for some reason. Izuku pushes Ochaku out of the way as fast as possible as he gets stunned. Izuku thinking he's just gonna take the blow and pretty much regenerate, but him not wanting to feel that pain. He still feels pain when he gets hit. So Izuku starts to see his body change and shift, but he doesn't see his full body shift. He looks at his arms as he's holding back the zero pointer's fist, as his arms are enveloped in some sort of scaly patterns, with his forearms glowing this green energy with some sort of black scales covering his hands and claws being a part of his hands. Izuku looks at his reflection in a nearby piece of water, or I guess reflection of some sort of lens on a nearby one pointer, and sees his hair have green stripes in it. His eyes glowing green energy, and more or less his eyes looking more demonistic or more demonic in nature. Izuku fights back, putting everything he has into a singular punch as his whole arm turns into his double trigger and his other arm goes back to normal. And through this huge punch, Izuku yells out, "Take it!" A huge shockwave takes on as the whole zero pointer's arm is obliterated on top of his whole left shoulder. As the zero pointer gets sent back flying into the air, like he literally makes the zero pointer go off the ground, falling into a nearby building. The spectators are shocked by this, and more than all, All Might is shocked as well, saying that this kid has a lot more potential than he lets on, and that maybe he was holding back. Izuku falls onto the ground, collapsing as his arm goes back to normal, as Izuku's whole jumpsuit, his upper body at least, his whole left arm at least, is completely ripped off. Izuku walks over towards, pretty much Ochaku, telling him or asking her, "Are you okay?" She says yes, but I should be asking you that. We get switched a few minutes later. Recovery Girl does heal him up. Recovery Girl does try to check on him, but Izuku heals pretty quickly. He's a little exhausted, but he does heal. We see how Izuku gets picked up by Nero. As I'm gonna leave it out here, guys. Hope you guys review. Hope you guys like and subscribe. And as always, guys, have a blessed day. Deuces.